The first time Aisha held a soldering iron in her hand, she felt the hum of possibility, a tiny surge of electricity dancing between her fingertips. She was only 12 and had scavenged old electronics from neighborhood yard sales. A broken radio here, a discarded laptop there. In the cramped confines of her parents' garage, she turned circuit boards into poems of copper and silicon, each connection a carefully chosen word. Week after week, she sketched wild designs in a battered notebook, diagrams of cells that stored more energy with less weight, formulas that whispered of greener chemistry. Her parents peeked in at odd hours, startled by the soft glow of LEDs under the hood of her prototype or the pungent scent of solvents simmering on the workbench. Their cautious excitement became her quiet anthem, "Go on, Aisha. See how far you can take it." As the years rolled by, what began as tinkering evolved into obsession. Chemistry sets gave way to lab-grade reagents, and her workshop expanded with scavenged glassware and salvaged power supplies. On late nights, she would crouch beneath the workbench, peering through a magnifier at the crystalline structures forming in her eco-ion polymer blends. She celebrated incremental victories, a cell that held 10% more charge, a batch that released half the usual carbon dioxide, each milestone feeding her hunger for the next breakthrough. Her notebooks filled with meticulous records, test conditions, humidity readings, voltage curves. Sometimes she'd read aloud her own entries, as if challenging them to do better. You promised lower cost. You promised cleaner byproducts. Now prove it. When the announcement came from Ralco-Tech, a global titan in battery manufacturing, she almost dismissed it as a publicity stunt. The company rarely acknowledged outsiders, especially not a garage scientist from a small town. But Ralco-Tech's open application for unconventional innovators offered a prize, a chance to present at their annual Innovation Summit, mentorship from senior engineers, and the possibility of development funding. Aisha felt her pulse quicken. She spent 2 sleepless weeks crafting a submission that would command attention. She distilled years of research into 10 crisp slides, an overview of her polymer chemistry, cost projections against existing lithium-ion cells, environmental impact assessments modeled on life cycle data. She included photos of her makeshift lab, test rigs cobbled from thrift store parts, and an invitation. Imagine a world where every device runs cleaner and longer. The night she clicked Submit, her garage felt too small, as though the walls might crumble under the weight of her own expectations. She paced among jars of reagents and spools of wire, her heart a restless machine. What if they laughed? What if they never responded? Yet even as doubt whispered, she reminded herself of every time she'd defied skepticism in science class, of every mentor who'd seen potential where others saw error. She poured a glass of water, stared at the condensation forming on its surface, and told herself, this is only the beginning. And with that, she straightened her shoulders, switched off the lights, and let the quiet of the night carry her toward whatever tomorrow would bring. Aisha stepped into the gleaming atrium of Ralco-Tech's headquarters, with her heart pounding like the machinery in her makeshift garage lab. Glass walls soared overhead, reflecting her own determined expression back at her, and the soft click of her shoes against the marble floor echoed in the cavernous space. Around her, teams of engineers in crisp suits clustered in small groups, heads bent over tablets and portfolios, their laughter bubbling through the air like an undercurrent she couldn't quite place. She clutched her sleek presentation case, the one she had carried everywhere for weeks, against her side, determined that no flicker of doubt would show on her face. When they called her name, she felt the room's current shift. Voices hushed, and all eyes turned toward the polished conference hall beyond the reception. Executives, their rank evident in the tailored cuts of their jackets and the confidence in their strides, took their seats in a long row of high-backed chairs. She swallowed hard and walked forward, each step measured as though the floor itself might betray her if she rushed. Her palms were damp, but she steadied them by pressing her fingers against the leather edge of the podium. As the projector flickered on and her opening slide appeared, a crisp rendering of her eco-ion polymer structure, they leaned back in their chairs. Their eyes flickered between the screen and her, curiosity mingled with skepticism. She launched into her introduction, voice firm, describing the potential to reduce manufacturing costs by 30%, to cut carbon emissions in half, to revolutionize battery life for electric vehicles and renewable grids alike. Her words carried the weight of endless nights spent poring over test data, the thrill of those first faint sparks in her prototype cells. But halfway through, a murmur grew at the back row. She caught sight of a senior director, his posture lax and his lips curved in a smirk, whispering to a colleague. Then came the question, delivered with casual condescension. So you're saying your garage-built formula can outsmart decades of our research? Laughter rippled from the dais, low at first but swelling until it filled the room, pressing against her like a physical force. Her voice faltered for a heartbeat, the slide advancing to reveal cost analysis charts that suddenly seemed to mock her. She closed her eyes, tasted the sting of humiliation, and felt heat rush to her cheeks. But as the laughter continued, something solidified in her chest, a determination honed sharper than any setback. She finished her presentation without hesitation, words deliberate and unwavering, drawing applause from a handful of curious onlookers at the edges. Then she turned, shoulders back, and strode from the room into the cool corridor beyond, each echoing footstep a promise. They might have laughed, but she would prove them all wrong. Aisha's phone buzzed insistently against the clutter of beakers and wires strewn across her workbench. But she barely noticed until she saw the subject line blinking on her laptop screen. Notice of patent issuance. Her heart hammered so loudly she wondered if the walls themselves would tremble. With trembling fingers, she clicked open the PDF, and there it was in black and white. Her name, her polymer formula, a patent number stamped like a seal of triumph. The official language felt almost surreal. Novelty, non-obviousness, exclusive rights to her eco-ion blend. She sank onto a stool, breath caught between disbelief and exhilaration, as memories of every late night and failed experiment flooded her mind. A moment later, she was on her feet, pacing the garage-turned lab with unsteady excitement. The soft green glow of her prototype cells seemed to pulse in celebration. She grabbed her phone to capture photos of the patent letter next to the original lab notebook page where she first sketched the molecular chains. Her hands shook so badly that she almost dropped the phone, but she steadied herself, lifted her chin, and whispered, "This is real." Within minutes, the outside world took notice. Her email pinged with messages from local reporters and science bloggers. "Is this for real?" one read. "Can we interview you?" asked another, urgent and polite. She answered each request with surprising composure, agreeing to an on-camera interview at sunset. By the time she hung up, notifications were swelling on her screen, tweets from tech influencers calling her work a game changer, posts in investor forums speculating on the impact to the energy sector, and a trending hashtag she half laughed at, Eco-Ion Revolution. Curiosity turned to consequence that afternoon when she refreshed a financial app and saw Ralcotech's ticker sliding downward. A footnote on a market analysis site warned that her patent might undercut the company's flagship products. Graphs dipped in real time, and her breath caught again, not from fear, but from the sheer force of what she'd unleashed. She watched as analysts debated how quickly her technology could be commercialized and what it would mean for legacy battery manufacturers. Her wildest dreams had always been about cleaner energy, but she hadn't fully grasped how her little idea could send tremors through Wall Street. As dusk settled, a camera crew arrived at her doorstep, lights and cables winding their way into the garage. Under the soft glow of portable lamps, Aisha described her journey, how a curious 12-year-old had turned a garage into a crucible of invention, and why she believed this was only the beginning. Behind her, rows of prototype cells glowed faintly, each one a testament to persistence. She spoke of sustainability and equitable access to technology, weaving in personal stories of community workshops she hoped to host one day. Later that evening, after the cameras left and her parents tucked her little brother into bed, Aisha stood alone amid her creations. The hum of a single charging cell filled the silence. She traced the contours of a test rig, imagining how her patent might power electric buses or rural microgrids. A thrill of purpose surged through her veins. The world had laughed when she applied, but now it was watching, and more importantly, it was listening. And as she flipped off the lights and locked the garage door, her reflection in the window was resolute. She knew that this patent was not an endpoint, but the spark of a revolution she was determined to light. Late one morning, the polished offices at Ralcotech trembled with a quiet frenzy as news of Aisha's patent rippled through upper management. In the legal department, paralegals sorted through stacks of documents, flagging every mention of eco-ion and comparing them against decades of Ralcotech's own research notebooks. Senior lawyers gathered in glass-walled conference rooms, voices hushed but urgent, debating whether to mount a challenge on grounds of prior art or insufficient novelty. Engineers were pulled from development teams to sketch potential workarounds, alternate polymer blends, synthetic additives, even new cell geometries, anything that might blunt the impact of Aisha's innovation on the company's flagship product line. Meanwhile, the public relations team drafted carefully worded statements about exploring collaborative possibilities, masking their alarm beneath corporate calm. Down the hall, a group of R&D directors stared at market reports showing the stock price dipping as analysts speculated on Aisha's technology disrupting battery margins. One director slammed her palm on the table, astonished at how quickly a lone inventor could rattle a Fortune 500 juggernaut. Another tapped at her tablet, calculation models running scenarios where Aisha's polymer could cut Ralcotech's market share by nearly a third within 2 years. They realized that this was more than a patent. It was a harbinger of change they could not silence. The mood shifted from confident dismissal to wary respect. This garage-born formula carried a force they had not anticipated. Across town, Aisha barely slept as her inbox filled with legal notices and tentative partnership offers alike. When Ralcotech's lawyers formally served papers contesting her claims, she met them with the steady support of pro bono counsel she had quickly assembled. Their strategy was meticulous. Demonstrate the clear timeline of her research, the unique composition of her polymer, and the documented deviations from existing technologies. As court dates were scheduled, Aisha balanced her time between lab experiments and courtroom preparations, her resolve burning brighter than any cell she had ever designed. She understood now that innovation was not just creation, but defense, a fight to prove that passion and perseverance could stand firm against decades of entrenched power. And in every late-night drafting session or tense deposition, she felt the pulse of her purpose echo. This was her moment to transform an industry and claim her rightful place within it. Sprosit ChatGPT. Early one morning, just as the city was stirring to life, Aisha received a terse email from Ralcotech's legal counsel requesting a meeting at their downtown headquarters. The message was curt but unmistakable. The company wished to discuss the patent challenge. She arrived in a modest blazer and jeans, her carry-on bag containing only her laptop and the original lab notebook pages that proved her timeline. In the sleek conference room, she found 3 senior executives, 2 in dark suits, 1 in a crisp white shirt, fidgeting with folders that bore her name. Their expressions were polite but strained, an uneasy mixture of respect and regret. As she took her seat, she sensed the shift. This was no longer a challenge to her credibility, but a bid to salvage their own. They opened with an apology for the company's initial skepticism and aggressive legal stance, admitting privately that they had underestimated both her innovation and her resolve. One senior VP cleared his throat and slid a draft licensing agreement across the polished wood table. The terms were generous: upfront payment, royalties on every cell produced using her polymer blend, but lacked any genuine commitment to the broader change Aisha sought. She listened patiently, her brown eyes steady, then leaned forward and spoke plainly. "I appreciate your offer, but I need more than royalties. I need you to invest in the future of diverse inventors." She named her conditions: a portion of licensing fees, earmarked to fund minority-led clean energy startups, a formal partnership to co-develop greener manufacturing processes in Ralcotech's own plants, and a commitment to open-source portions of the non-core research to educational institutions. The executives exchanged glances, visibly recalculating their stance. After a tense pause, the white-shirted director nodded and conceded that Aisha's demands were reasonable and even beneficial to Ralcotech's long-term reputation. Over the next 2 hours, they negotiated clause by clause, drafting language that bound Ralcotech to a 3-year, $10 million fund for underrepresented innovators, plus a 10-year exclusive license for Aisha's polymer, with royalties structured to increase as global production scaled. When the final signatures were penned, Aisha felt the weight of history settle into place. A garage inventor had transformed the priorities of an industry titan. Within days, the partnership was announced at a joint press conference. Flashbulbs popped as Aisha stood beside Ralcotech's CEO, her smile bright but knowing. She spoke of accountability and access, urging companies everywhere to follow suit. Journalists noted the irony. The same executives who once laughed at her methods now praised her vision. The story dominated business news, highlighting how a single patent could rewrite corporate responsibility. Ralcotech's share price rebounded as investors cheered the company's agile embrace of innovation and social impact. With funding secured, Aisha launched Green Origins Labs, converting her parents' garage into a vibrant incubator space. The first cohort comprised 7 young innovators from communities long overlooked by traditional R&D pipelines. An Appalachian engineer working on low-cost solar cells, a Detroit entrepreneur designing recyclable plastics, and a Navajo inventor creating battery-powered water purification systems. Together they shared benches, microscopes, and whiteboards scrawled with possibilities. Aisha hosted weekly workshops on patent law, fundraising, and technical validation, inviting Ralcotech mentors to guide the fellows and forging bridges between startup scrappiness and corporate scale. At the gala unveiling of Green Origins Labs, attendees, industry leaders, community supporters, and the press mingled beneath strings of Edison bulbs. Aisha, wearing a simple emerald dress, took the stage and recounted her own journey, from late nights soldering circuit boards to negotiating multi-million-dollar deals. She dedicated the lab to every maker told they didn't belong and announced the first grant recipients by name. As applause rolled through the hall, she spotted the Ralcotech executives in the back, eyes glistening with admiration rather than derision. Later, standing alone on the rooftop terrace, Aisha gazed at the city skyline, lit by the very batteries she'd helped propel forward. She reflected on how laughter had once threatened to uproot her dreams, but instead had become the force that drove her to redefine success, not just for herself, but for every underdog with an idea. The night air felt charged with possibility, and she knew this was only the prologue to a movement whose spark she had ignited.